Welcome to the video, guys. Nigel Farage recently appeared on a podcast called the Planet Normal Podcast, where he has continued his campaign against the invasion taking place on the South Coast daily. The podcast is hosted by Telegraph journalists who kind of join in with Nigel, taking not only Serco and the government to task, but also the French government, woke media, and of course the incompetent anti-British Labour Party, who will scream from the rooftops if Boris Johnson actually takes action on this, which is not likely considering we know Boris Johnson has not exactly been strong on anything so far, which Nigel Farage rightly calls him out on, not only for the migrant votes but also for their lack of commitment to law and order, something we have seen in the last few months with the media-inspired race-baiting bullshit that is supported by fringe lunatics and outright racist lowlifes, not by the majority of this country. But as I said, Nigel Farage pulls no punches, so let's see what he has to say in these few clips I took from their hour-long podcast that I will link below if you want to listen to the whole show. But before we do that, remember the daily live stream has moved over to Twitch until I get the podcast sorted out. So if you want to join me over there, the link will be down in the video description, along with the channel's other links if you want to support what I do on other platforms like BitChute, Patreon, and the rest of them. But back to the video and the clips from Nigel Farage's appearance on the Planet Normal podcast.
It started in 2018, 2019, the numbers started to grow. And I was aware in April that the numbers coming had picked up significantly. So I wanted to find out why. And there were really two key reasons. The first is that virtually no one that comes into the country illegally ever gets removed, and that's a big sell for the traffickers. But the other thing was, because we're now in this transition period, having left the EU, the traffickers' big sell is that pay your money, we'll get you across to England, they'll put you in a nice 4-star hotel. They'll give you £40 a week spending money. It'll be great. But if you don't come this year, by next year, they may well have left EU rules and it might not be possible. So I could see what was going on. And when I first started tracking this, about 1,000 people this year had come. And so I went down, spent some time in the channel, working out what was going on. And then I saw the most outrageous thing, that despite somewhere between 60 and £100 million of British taxpayers' money being given to the French in the last few years to stop this trade from happening, that actually the French Navy were escorting these boats into British waters, handing them over to Border Force or the lifeboats, who were then acting like a taxi service. And I wanted to blow the lid on that, which I did. To my astonishment, what I found on social media were millions and millions of people watching my films, interacting, and still nothing from mainstream media at all. But now, at last, they're onto it, and we're getting tough talk from the government. But remember, last August, Boris said illegal immigrants are illegal and will be returned to France, and there isn't much prospect right now of that happening. Serco have been given a contract for £2 billion, £2 billion for the next 10 years to house illegal immigrants who come in and then try and go through the asylum claims process. And what's happening, Alison, is hotels are being filled up all over the country without any consultation, of course, with the local community. And the bizarrest thing I found was a hotel in Hoylake, just outside Liverpool, where not only was the whole hotel taken over, but somebody had paid for them to go on a trip of Anfield Stadium the week after Liverpool won the Premiership. I mean, so can you imagine? Because all these guys, and by the way, I say guys advisedly.
Yes, it is mainly young men, isn't it?
Yeah, let's not get conned by the woke media who will have you believe that everyone coming is an 8-month pregnant woman who suffered horrific abuse. 85% of those that cross the channel are young men between the ages of 18 and 26. They're deserting their families, wherever they come from, Pakistan, Eritrea, Sudan, all over the world. Almost none of these young men would ever qualify under the 1951 Geneva Convention definition of what a refugee is. They're economic migrants. And frankly, I think for a country that voted Brexit, and one of the main reasons we did it was to get back control of our borders, and here we are with a Conservative government who told people at the election that immigration is something they were going to make a priority. I feel, frankly, what we're going through daily in the channel now is a national humiliation. But the real issue is this. Australia faced a very similar situation a decade ago, all right? The boats were coming from Indonesia. So you were dealing with larger distances, bigger boats, more people, but the principle was exactly the same. What the Australian Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, did, not just turn boats around and tow them back to Indonesia, but more significantly, what he said is that anybody that comes into Australia via this route will never be allowed to claim refugee status. And if this government had the political will, and yes, I know they'll be condemned by the United Nations and the Labour Party and probably some in their own party, but unless we do that, we're not going to stop this. And it's just as simple as that.
These people are being queue jumped, aren't they?
Yeah.
By these illegal young men, many of whom seem to be able to pay thousands of pounds for their passage, which doesn't suggest that they're in tremendous difficulty, does it?
No, and they've got lovely Nike shoes, of course, and they've got the most up-to-date Apple iPhones and all the rest of it. Look, I mean, let's be fair. I'm sure there are some people who have come from horrendous circumstances. I'm sure there are. But the vast majority, as I say, would never qualify as refugees. And it's so difficult to have a sensible conversation about this without people branding you, screaming at you. Truth of it is, I've met, over the last 3 months, many members of the ethnic communities who feel just as strongly about this as you and I do.
Pocket rocket. She's going to crack down on immigration, on crime. These, as you say, huge displays at Dover. She's appointed Dan Mahoney as the splendidly titled UK's clandestine channel threat commander. Nigel, has Pretty been nobbled? What's happened?
Look, I mean, I know Priti Patel. I like her. I think her instincts are right. She's a Conservative, which is a very rare thing in the current Conservative cabinet, because they're mostly a bunch of kids with rich daddies who play at politics. They're absolutely careerists. But of course, the real problem is that Boris isn't really a Conservative, is he? I mean, Boris is a Metro Liberal. Boris, as Mayor of London, more than once talked about having amnesties for all illegal immigrants who were in London. He does not seem to have the political will to deal with this. I feel a bit sorry for her, actually, because I think she's being left a bit high and dry. And you mentioned there law and order. Even more worrying to me at the moment than what is going on across the Channel is the outbreaks of lawlessness that we are now seeing around the country. And the number of people in the last couple of weeks I've spoken to who just say, do you know what, Nigel, we're going to get out of London. We just do not want our kids growing up in a city where the police have now given up and lost control. The vast majority of Conservative supporters and voters, and particularly in that red wall that helped give Boris, his majority, they want to live in a country where the police are in control, where we have proper law and order. And I think Boris is in danger of losing Middle England on these subjects. I really do.
Well, rather than discussing each clip, as I went through them, I decided to just play the ones I had taken for you, since to be honest, I cannot argue with most, if not all of what he actually said, and they are only short anyway. He is bang on the money for the most part. One criticism I would lay on Nigel off the top of my head is the way he frames it, as if he has done all the work on this. Let's be real here, he only found out about it because members of the public have actually told him. He needs to start crediting the guys who put in the work on the South Coast that let us know any of this was going on, and especially to this degree. He may actually be right on the Priti Patel comment, but I don't really know, simply because we know Boris Johnson is a liberal at heart and not in a good way. If she was trying to be a hard ass on immigration, he could be stopping her, but we don't know for sure, so until then we will hold them all responsible. But you heard Nigel say the government could do what Australia did by sending them straight back and automatically refusing anyone entry who tries to get in that way, which is obviously something I have pointed out before that Boris could do, but he lacks the meat and two veg to actually do it because the media and lefty shitweasels will attack him for it, and I think he's scared of that. We can only hope he will grow a pair of balls, but like I said before, don't bet your life on it. Nigel Farage is definitely right to continue calling out Serco the contract that was given to him, and also the fact that it is possible for them to actually do something about this, though like I've said, the government appears to be as weak as piss water, so don't bet your life, your house, or even a fiver on it, it's that bad. Now, I do find it amazing how many of these media shitweasels are jumping on the bandwagon getting behind this now, when we have all been screaming at them for months and years about the situation that goes on the South Coast, because it obviously hasn't started now. This is something that has happened many times before, and obviously the government or media have completely ignored it. Now all of a sudden they're all back behind it, talking all this smack, but will they actually do anything about it? I really don't know. Nigel Farage is good at pressuring the government to do things, but usually it takes 20 years, and we certainly don't have 20 years to wait of this bullshit going on. If you think there's 48,000 migrants sitting in hotels currently as we speak, according to the figures that we know about now, if you allow this to go on for a couple more years, especially if you're talking about 2 decades, which is usually how long it takes to pressure the Tories to do anything if Brexit is anything to go by, then we could end up with a few 100,000 illegal immigrants housed in hotels and God knows where else by the time that has come around, which obviously cannot be allowed to happen, and the pressure needs to keep being applied to the government to actually do something about it. But like I said, there's no guarantee that they will. But like I said earlier, the podcast will be linked below if you want to watch it all. This was just a small portion from it. Once again though, well done to Nigel for getting it in the mainstream. In 20 years, the government might act on it like they did Brexit, as I've already said.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.